Well, students, we now come to the discussion of types of collision. Now, in order to define the various types of collision, Newton devised a particular quantity which he called coefficient of restitution. So I will just write it down. This coefficient of restitution. Coefficient of restitution. Now, this coefficient of restitution is presented by the letter E and is defined as relative velocity of separation, divided by relative velocity of approach. So this is fundamentally the parameter, the coefficient of restitution, on the basis of which various types of collision was defined. Now, there was first a type of collision where this E happens to be 1, and that is what we call a perfectly elastic collision. Now, here we call it a perfectly elastic collision. In a perfectly elastic collision, what happens is that the coefficient of restitution becomes 1. So that implies, as you can understand, that the velocity of separation and approach becomes same. So if I strike a ball towards a wall with a velocity v, then it is bound to get rebound with the same velocity v if the coefficient of restitution is 1. And then we have a second case where the value lies between 1 and 0. So the second case is that the value lies between 1 and 0. Now, when the value lies between 1 and 0, we say that the value, or for this particular value, the collision is known as partly elastic collision. Now, we have to specifically apply ourselves in order to understand that what we mean when we say that the collision is partly elastic. So now let us go on to that discussion, that what happens when a partly elastic collision takes place. So you see, for a partly elastic collision, what happens is, for a perfectly elastic collision, what happens is that the momentum is conserved as well as the kinetic energy is conserved. So we have two things conserved together, the momentum and the kinetic energy. When the value of E lies between 0 and 1, what happens is that the momentum is conserved, fine, but there is a loss in kinetic energy. Now, this loss of kinetic energy is converted to other form of energy, namely heat, because as we have a collision, you can say two metal balls are colliding, you can measure the rise of temperature in that case, for a perfectly elastic collision. So, due to that loss of kinetic energy getting converted to heat. It can be light also, as you can see sparks when very fast collision takes place, particularly for cars, racing cars and all that. And then it is sound, as we all know that every collision provides a sound, bang, sound. So that is what is we call the loss of kinetic energy, gets converted to either heat or light or sound. And then we come to the third situation, which is a theoretical situation which do not take place in practice very much, which is perfectly inelastic collision. So this is a case where E is equal to 0, and this is perfectly inelastic collision. Now, what is happening here is that neither momentum nor kinetic energy is conserved. And the closest example of this such a situation is two clay balls colliding together. So two clay balls colliding together give us a very, very near to application of perfectly inelastic collision, where neither momentum nor kinetic energy, nothing gets conserved. So these are the three types of collision that we have. Firstly, we have the perfectly elastic collision. Secondly, we have partly elastic collision. And then finally, we have the perfectly inelastic collision. So I will again check it out. That the first case, we have the coefficient of restitution as 1, which we called a perfectly elastic collision, and then we have partly elastic, and then we have perfectly inelastic. So these are basically the types of collision that we are dealing with, perfectly elastic. inelastic. So this is the three situations that we have. But we most of the cases come across this kind of a situation where this and this are two merely theoretical cases. This though can be made to happen in practice with certain conditions, but this is a very rare phenomena, as we have already discussed, the closest of which, thank you very much, that is we have four types of collision. Thank you. For testing your understanding of this lesson and more videos, log on to www.tubelessons.net.